Okay, welcome everybody to today's IOER-Forum. My name is Artem Korzeniewicz. I'm the head of the research group Sustainable Economic Dynamics and Innovation here at IOER. And I'm happy to announce that we have a great topic to discuss today. So we will talk about change agency and sustainability transition and the role of transition intermediaries. Our keynote speaker today is Professor Daniel Schiller from the University of Greifswald. And we have a co-talk by Dr. Franziska Ehnert from IOER. So let me introduce our keynote speaker. Daniel Schiller is a professor of economic and social geography at the University of Greifswald. And his research is focused on sustainability transition in regional economies, in particular, for example, on sustainable structural change towards the bioeconomy, or change agency in peripheral regions, on societal innovation capacity, and further topics. His research has a regional focus on Germany, the Baltic Sea region, and East and Southeast Asia. And he has a large number of academic publications and large number of third-party funded projects, as I understand, upon which also today's talk is based. So I am happy to give a floor to you, Professor Daniel Schiller, and this will be a talk about green transition, opportunity spaces, and change agency in peripheral regions. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and for the introduction. Greetings from the northeastern corner to the southeastern part of the country. And yeah, in my talk today, as Artem Korzeniewicz already introduced, I proposed a more conceptual topic: green transition, opportunity spaces, and change agency in peripheral regions. However, as you will see in the presentation, I decided to focus it a little bit more on the bioeconomy, because I saw that with Michaela Trippel and also Markus Grillitsch, you had presenters who, I guess, already introduced the concept of change agency and all these things to a great extent. So my presentation will be maybe a little bit more empirical than I thought in the beginning, but I hope this maybe even beneficial for the discussion. And I will try to share my slides. I hope this works. Yeah.
Yes, great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and the agenda is as follows. Yes. So I will briefly introduce the talk with a motivation why taking the bioeconomy as an example for a green transition, and also for a potential opportunity space in peripheral and rural areas. And then I will give a short overview of the literature on opportunity spaces. And then I will come to empirical illustrations from two different projects, actually. One more on quantitative findings on the distribution of R&D projects in the field of bioeconomy, and then also on qualitative findings related to change agency and also to path development towards the bioeconomy. And then, yeah, some conclusions and maybe implications also for rural policy. That's basically the outline for the next 30 minutes. And yeah, as you all know, I guess the bioeconomy really became a powerful political leitmotif in the last years on the EU level, on the national level, but also in Germany, in many federal states. This has become a priority. for funding, for startup development, etc. And if you look at these strategies, particularly the German bioeconomy strategy, but also the European bioeconomy strategy, you will see that rural areas are mentioned there quite often. So there is at the EU level something on the European rural bioeconomy, and in the German bioeconomy there is one of the fields of actions that is called in English using bioeconomy potentials to develop rural areas. And there the German government concludes that particularly rural areas have a large potential for value creation, workplaces, and also quality of life. And this kind of political discourse is somehow related, on the one hand, to the biomass potential, of course, that rural areas possess, but also, of course, related to the processing then of these biomasses and creation of further value that goes beyond the pure production of the biomass itself. So development of bioeconomy value chains that are somehow anchored in rural areas. That's, I guess, the political hope here. Yeah, of course, this is also related, and I will also discuss this, and maybe we can expand this in the discussion. Is also, of course, related to sustainability issues. When it comes to land use and the question whether it is really a sustainable transition if we use the already stressed resource land even more intensively to produce maybe even more biomasses. So, of course, these kind of sustainability considerations are also important. There's also a lot of critique with regard to bioeconomy development. Just quickly, maybe for those who have not worked that intensely with the concept of the bioeconomy, and of course also it's a bit fuzzy still, I guess, what is the bioeconomy and what it is not. A very quick definition. With bioeconomy, I mean that a concept of the economy that is based on production, utilization, and conservation of biological resources. And what is important is that the bioeconomy can somehow occur in across all economic sectors. So it's not just the biomass production and the processing, but it's also, of course, bio-based products that can be used in sectors as diverse as the textile industry or car manufacturing, medicine, etc. And within all these bioeconomy definitions, there is also a notion of a sustainable economy, as I mentioned, highly debated whether really all bioeconomy applications are sustainable if we for example, use renewable biomasses instead of fossil resources, but maybe we run in different sustainability issues here too. Okay, that's maybe for the brief introduction about the bioeconomy and what is the aim and what are the research questions for the remainder of the talk. So the aim is basically to integrate some theoretical approaches in economic geography into a conceptual framework for opportunity spaces, and to illustrate this framework then by empirical evidence from the knowledge-based bioeconomy with some specific questions. One question is, does the bioeconomy really contribute to inclusive regional innovation and spatial justice? So there is, I guess, a lot of debate if we have knowledge intensive growth, whether this is leading to higher disparities among centers of the economy where a lot of innovations are often created, and rural and peripheral areas. And with the bioeconomy, there's at least the hypothesis that because of the use of biomasses and the potential location of processing activities, there are better chances for rural areas than maybe in other knowledge-intensive sectors that are developing. So this is somehow research question one. And then a deeper look into the question who are change agents towards the bioeconomy in the rural and peripheral area, which barriers do they also face there, and then a look at path creation and the diversity of pathways towards bioeconomy that occur in the rural and peripheral area. Okay, and yeah. So the framework consists, or the framework that I'm using here consists of different literatures, I would say. So on the one hand, the literature on path development in general, but then on green path development in particular. And this literature argues that paths in general, but green paths in particular, are really place-based and context-specific events, and that because of the resource land in rural areas, there are large potentials, or there could be potentials for these areas to be the starting point of green paths. And this path development literature is also discussing where new development paths do come from. And according to Born-Boschma and the Utrecht School, there is a strong focus on related variety, so that new path developments are somehow related to competencies that have been there in the region before. Which is, when you think about rural and peripheral regions, sometimes also an idea that has its limits, because compared to very diversified urban economies, rural areas maybe have fewer options then to develop related paths. So there is also the discussion about other forms of path development in the literature. So, for example, really the new creation of paths, when you think about maybe some innovations that come from universities or research institutes, which are probably even located in a rural area. And when this comes together, maybe with traditional agricultural production, then there might be the potential really to create a new path. Also, the importation of paths that firms from other regions invest in your region is another form that is possible here, and also maybe the renewal of traditional industry. So when you think maybe about the traditional agri-food industry, then yeah, the bioeconomy could be a potential for path renewal in these more traditional sectors. So this would be this conceptual building block of green path development. And then then of course bioeconomy is a strongly policy-driven idea. So what we can look at here is the discourse about the mission-oriented innovation policy. So innovation policy that is conducted with the aim to somehow address the grand societal challenges. And of course, mission-oriented innovation policy is also concerned about green path development on the one hand. So bioeconomy fits into this discourse quite good. And also there's also the discussion about counteracting dark sides of innovation. And with dark sides of innovation, I mean here On the one hand, that innovation could be harmful to the environment, but that innovation could also, of course, be harmful when it comes to social sustainability. For example, if new industries are leading to larger spatial disparities in the end. And if you think about an increased importance of green industries, increased importance of the use of biomass, then this potentially has spatial implications, because this green economy somehow depends on rural resources. And that might be a development potential here. So this would be the second building block. And then, of course, there is this large literature on sustainability transitions that has developed over the last years. And for this concept, I think there is still a need to discuss place and space in a more detailed way. So this is at least what geographers argue when it comes to sustainability transitions. And here the look at rural areas and their role in sustainability transitions could be an approach. Also, a critique of the sustainability transition literature is that the target dimension, what is sustainability, and how can we really measure the outcomes of a sustainability transition, whether it's really more sustainable than previous solutions or not, is still vaguely defined. So approaches to really assess the sustainability of bioeconomy solutions is important here. And the role of agency is also not fully developed. Bioeconomy is also in this transition literature not that often discussed. So the sustainability transition literature often or more often discusses the mobility transition or energy transition, for example, but transitions in the field of agricultural production in general, bioeconomy in particular, is still covered to a lesser extent. And then, in the middle, final concept that I will refer to is change agency, and particularly regional change agency. Here we have a growing literature that concludes that it's really these kind of agentic processes that are important, particularly for green regional paths also, because these change agents maybe have to break the traditional paths and traditional ways of the economy. Maybe some sociological and particular institutional perspectives are also needed in this regard when it comes, for example, to regulations that often affect the use also of new products, which is also the case in the field of bioeconomy. And then I guess this was also discussed in the previous forum that you had with Markus Grilic, these kind of different change agencies. So that change agency might occur from innovative entrepreneurs in the Schumpeterian sense, who are founding new companies, but that this is not sufficient. In addition, there is also this institutional entrepreneurship that is really involved with changing the rules of the game and to enabling or to enable new industries to really grow then. And also when you look at regions, this kind of more collective place-based leadership. So groups of people who really work together to form regional networks and to also make the region known in other places, which is particularly important maybe in rural areas, which might be overlooked by policymakers or by other decision makers, that there is this kind of collective place-based leadership. Okay, so these are conceptual approaches, and maybe just one short note on peripheries, because I mentioned terms like rural regions or peripheral regions quite a lot. And of course, this is also something that is a rather complex thing, I would say. There is, I think, one very good article that was just recently published that somehow makes this clearer, these kind of different roles of peripheries when it comes to the field of innovation. So there is maybe one narrative that says, okay, peripheries are not innovative, and that's why they are peripheries, because they are not in the center of innovation networks, and maybe they are lacking resources for innovation. But then there is also this kind of innovation despite narrative, which means that also against all odds, somehow you can have innovation in some certain places, which is then maybe more out of serendipity or something like that. But there is also this innovation because narrative that for some fields, the periphery is maybe even beneficial for innovation, and that distancing yourself from the large centers maybe also gives opportunities for niche development, and in this field, or in this narrative, we could also include maybe this kind of biomass and processing of biomass narrative in the bioeconomy. And of course, peripheries are maybe defined by different aspects. So it's maybe there are different characteristics. On the one hand, the characteristic of the periphery might be that it's just far away from something that is considered as the core, so more like geographical or physical distance somehow of regions. But then it can also be a kind of a dispersion, so that there is really a lack of connections with central regions. Or of course, there might be a lack of internal coherence, because there are maybe very few actors in the region, and therefore you are not having these kind of dense intra-regional networks in the periphery. Yeah? So you have this kind of distance also in terms of network aspects, and not only in terms of physical distance, which I think is important to mention. Okay, and for the analysis, we came up with a small framework for opportunity spaces in this category of rural and peripheral areas. And here in this framework, we argue that or this is more like a hypothesis, we argue that for rural and peripheral areas, there might be new opportunity spaces because of megatrends, new megatrends in innovation. And my focus today is mostly on greening, as I already introduced, but it can also be argued that maybe digitalization brings new opportunities, or now even this is something I just newly added, the energy crisis. Of course, this is also highly discussed, whether this will lead to a shift in location patterns, where regions that are producing renewable energies might benefit. And it's often rural areas that are these regions where renewable energy, or also coastal regions, for example, where you have offshore wind and maybe hydrogen, that they might benefit. And also there might be new modes of innovation that offer new opportunity spaces. So new business models that maybe fit when you think about social innovation, also with rural areas. also consumer behavior and lifestyles that are changing, and also the more participative approach to innovation. So this is a hypothesis. There might be new opportunity spaces in rural areas, and probably change agency. When it comes to change agency, this might materialize in different ways in rural areas. So on the one hand, the argument that I already mentioned, this kind of innovation because argument in the literature, some people also call it slow innovation, which is proven for the creative industries in some cases, that this might be a specific strategy to go to more remote areas, but which might also work in other fields. So this could be one manifestation here. The other one might be that rural areas, just because they offer the space and when we talk about biomass, also the agricultural resources, that they might become or enter the innovation scene as test fields and model regions here. So this would be maybe more kind of externally led development than in rural areas. Or there might also be the option of developing high-tech islands. For example, when you think about universities and research institutes that are located in rural areas, then they might be the seed beds for startups that might collaborate with traditional industries and might really lead to a more endogenous high-tech development within rural areas. And of course, potentials from the integration between rural and urban value chains. Okay, and then we might have different outcomes, but I think these outcomes, I discussed them already. So far to theoretical considerations, and I see that I already used quite some time. So I guess it's time to come to some empirical findings with regard to the bioeconomy, to illustrate some of these things that are happening here. These empirical findings are from three projects, mostly from the first two projects. So from one project where we really took a data-driven approach and analyzed R&D funding data for the bioeconomy. Then one project where we focused here on our region in the northeastern part of Germany, the Western Pomeranian region, within a large IOER consortium on the bioeconomy. There from I draw some qualitative results, and the conceptual considerations that I already discussed are mostly from our ongoing DFG project, which is focusing in a broader sense on these change agency issues. And yeah, talking about these quantitative findings, I need one slide to maybe explain the data that we used later on. So we applied the German subsidy database, or Förderkatalog in German, where R&D projects, publicly funded R&D projects from the federal ministries, mainly from the Ministry of Science and Research, are listed, and we identified the bioeconomy related projects there, also with the use of some text mining tools. And then we distinguished the bioeconomy in different fields, mainly in a biotechnology core and a bioeconomy shell. And we argued that on the one hand we have this even longer established thing like the biotechnology, green biotech, red biotech, white biotech. I guess this is maybe familiar to you. And with the notion of the bioeconomy, this biotechnology vision has been broadened, and biomass aspects and also has been introduced. So this is then input dimension, and also the use the material use of the biomass in different products, also for energy and fuels, for food and feed, has been added, and also a larger chunk of research projects that are related to socioeconomic aspects. And then in the following, we will analyze these biotechnology core projects and compare them with this kind of broader bioeconomy shell projects that are related to biomass production and also to the material use. And what you can see then, if you look at this map, is on the right side is the biotechnology only, and then the other parts that are also part of the bioeconomy on the left side. And I think if you just look at these maps, of course, you see that some established urban centers stick out here still, but particularly for this kind of bioeconomy shell for these projects, biomass production, R&D, so R&D for biomass production, material use, socioeconomic framework. You also see that a lot of rural regions also are having several projects, and particularly if you look at the change in the number of projects over time, you see that this is also happening in regions that are maybe not considered as urban core regions. So there is some evidence also in this data, but just by looking at this map, and we can show even more evidence that this kind of bioeconomy without the biotechnology is working somewhat different from the biotechnology. If we run a regression model where we explain the number of projects per region, with a negative binomial regression analysis that is using the labor catchment areas. This is also what has been shown in the previous map, these kind of labor catchment areas. And in this regression model, I think the particularly interesting variables are unemployment rate, GDP per capita, and population density. So if you look at the bioeconomy without this kind of high-tech biotechnology part, you can see that a higher unemployment rate leads to more projects in this field, and a lower GDP per capita also, and also lower population density. If we take this as an indicator as a very simple indicator for a rural and peripheral region, you can see that this also has this negative effect. So less dense population means more bioeconomy projects. And this looks different from what you get if you take all projects from the subsidy database. And this also looks different from what you get if you look at only these high-tech biotechnology projects. So this could be an indication that this is really spatially more evenly distributed, that also structurally weak regions or rural regions can have higher chances to benefit. However, also knowledge intensity, so the share of the workforce so human resources in science and technology is the indicator here, still is important. So it can work probably in a rural region, but it's still necessary that there is maybe a university or a research institute in the region that helps to also attract these kind of R&D projects. So this is maybe one of the quantitative findings that we get, and we can also see this with the Gini coefficient. If we use a concentration measure of the Gini coefficient, we also see that this has some that this is lower and decreasing for the projects that exclude the biotechnology. That's maybe for the quantitative findings. And for the qualitative findings, I would just move to our region in the northeastern part of Germany, which is the project region for this WIR Alliance Plant Cube. Or Plant 3, which is a bioeconomy alliance. And just to show you the region that is covered here, northeastern part of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania. I think this cluster is maybe already one example for some kind of collective agency or place-based leadership, because in this kind of cluster, we already see some collaboration between university and government and intermediaries and also private companies who are running this alliance. And also the idea of using the specific resources, agricultural, also peatlands, and also the sea marine bioresources here. However, what we can see if we look at this region, we really see something that is often mentioned in the literature as organizational thinness. So even though there is this alliance, it really relies on very few actors. However, these actors are really working jointly and collectively, but of course, it's often then that the same people meet in different different occasions again and again. Organizational thinness. And if we look at these change agencies, what we can see with regard to innovative entrepreneurship, this is really a challenge, because university startups and maybe there are a few highly innovative firms in the region, but if we look at the broad number of smaller companies and also farmers, we also see a lot of reluctancy when it comes, for example, to R&D projects and these kind of approaches, so that they are sometimes also not that much interested in joining, or that it's maybe not really the focus that they are having. Institutional entrepreneurship is something that is maybe a strong part in this region. There is the smart specialization strategy of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania, and one of the successes maybe of this alliance was to bring the bioeconomy into the smart specialization strategy of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania as one cross-cutting topic. And there are also a lot of actions to influence agricultural policy at the EU level when it comes to the use of peatland, peatlands, or the re-wetting of peatlands when it comes to this region here. And place-based leadership, there are also some good examples, I guess, here. And then what I would like to do on the final slides is just to illustrate a few modes of path development that are present in the region. So what we can really see is that it would be too simple to say path development is only related variety or is only new path creation. But what we even in such a small region can see is that really different kind of mechanisms of path development towards the bioeconomy exist next to each other. One example for path importation is, I think a good example is an R&D facility of the Continental company in Anklam. So this is maybe really also something where the region, a rural region, becomes a test field or a pilot area for applications. And Continental invested here to produce natural rubber from the Russian dandelion, which you can see here on the picture. So they entered contract farming arrangements with farmers in the region, and they tried to improve by plant breeding, by new farming methods, by post-harvest processing. They try to improve this technology of using rubber from the Russian Dandelion instead of importing it from, for example, Southeast Asia. So this is maybe an illustration for path importation that is happening. Path renewal, upgrading. There are also a lot of examples where traditional agri-food value chains are upgraded. Crop diversification, for example, with the blue lupine here, and then there is a local startup company as a key actor for this. That is an example for this path. But then there is also strong collaboration with universities, research institutes, and farmers in the region, which is different from the continental example, because for the continental example, there's really research collaboration with the Fraunhofer Institute in Münster, and also, of course, with the headquarters in Hanover. So there are a lot of inter-regional networks, but in this case, there are more inter-regional networks also with the intra-regional networks also with the University of Applied Science. For example, here. And then there is also, there are attempts for path creation. So things that start really from basic research in pharmacy, in biotechnology, in marine biotechnology at the University of Greifswald. There is a lot of research on using different algae from the Baltic Sea. And this is maybe a potential, I would say, that a high-tech island could emerge if really these kind of polysaccharides have a breakthrough. And this is also in collaboration then with the university spin-offs and also with local fishermen here that potentially can get involved in collection or cultivation of algae in the future. So, and the final potential path that I would like to mention is, of course, when it comes to the bioeconomy, really this kind of reconciliation of biomass production and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So there we see in the region great potential for revetting of peatlands, because our drained peatlands are responsible for the major share of greenhouse gas emissions in Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania, and with the bioeconomy, there might be options for something that is called paludiculture, so agriculture and forestry on wet peatlands. And here we see also strong global and local interdependencies, so global climate action together with local rural transition. And we have a lot of change agents in the region with strong intrinsic motivation for this issue. But this also leads to conflicts in the region, because parts of the local population and also farmers and landowners are skeptical what will happen with the value of their land if this kind of rewetting takes place, and are the options to produce biomass on rewetted peatlands really that attractive here. And here we also see barriers when it comes to such a transition, barriers in terms of communication, participation, and also EU agricultural policy as an institutional barrier. Okay, that's maybe for the examples in the region. And then I think when I look at the time, it's maybe good to conclude at this moment. What I try to show you is that there are potentials of bioeconomy paths for inclusive regional innovation, related with these first quantitative findings on the R&D projects. But from the qualitative findings, you can also see that change agency in peripheral regions is fragile, relies on very few individuals and their networks, but maybe this can also help to make people more willing to act collectively, because if there are so few and if they don't work together, then then nothing will really happen. There is, of course, this kind of necessity of a transition towards sustainable land use as a result of global agreements, but this is also associated with conflicts that are carried out locally, with example would be rewetting of peatlands here. And in the more broader sense, I guess we can see that the bioeconomy provides several options for empirical testing of concepts and theory development in economic geography, but critical approaches, I guess, are needed to avoid these kind of exaggerated expectations, and also with a look at sustainability rebound effects if we further intensify land use here. Okay, and I guess with this, there are still some implications. Sorry, implications for rural development policy would be, of course, to take these kind of specific contexts into account and to allow maybe a diversity of development paths, to integrate also the kind of transition management to make, if you can think about land use, to make these transitions happen. Creation of opportunity spaces is maybe also a field for policy support when it comes to institutions, to rules of the game, and also when it comes to even more support for responsible research and innovation. Strengthening of agency could be something here to identify and target promising new paths as early as possible. Capacity building, particularly among the less experienced innovators, maybe some traditional SMEs, also farmers that are often overlooked by innovation policy. Rural-urban integration as another issue, and of course also sustainable land use promotion, and also when it more comes to societal innovation capacities, also this kind of reconciliations of global and local tensions. Okay, so far that would be it, and thanks for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much. I think in particular, like the last points on the importance of individuals and their networks is a very good connection to the next talk on our core presentation today. I don't see any immediate questions in the chat or something, so I think we will just proceed to the presentation by Franziska Ehnert. So Franziska Ehnert is a senior researcher at IOER, focusing on urban transformative governance and transdisciplinary research to advance sustainability transformation. And today she will talk about bridging the old and new in sustainability transitions, the role of transition intermediaries in facilitating urban experimentation, and this is where the individuals and their networks come to play. So Franziska, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can all now see the slides. I also would like to welcome you to this IOER-Forum, and I will focus on transition intermediaries as a specific type of change agents. Transitions are accompanied by the breakdown of old and the buildup of new socio-technical configurations. Now, this raises the question of how to mediate and translate between the old and the new. Transition intermediaries do act as facilitators and translators between innovative niches and established regimes. However, there is still limited understanding of the role of intermediaries in urban experimentation. The article therefore wants to create a dialogue between the study of transition intermediaries and the study of urban experimentation. It provides an empirical exploration of the roles of transition intermediaries in urban experimentation processes, and it studies the research questions of how do transition intermediaries contribute to reconfiguration by mediating between the breakdown of the old and the build-up of new societal configurations? What roles and functions do transition intermediaries adopt? in these experimentation processes and how to innovate urban governance to introduce also intermediation as a novel mode of governing sustainability transitions. Based on a review of the literature on intermediaries and sustainability transition studies, diverse roles and functions could be identified, and they have been synthesized by scholars to generate 6 main functions. These are the envisioning and articulating needs and expectations for change, the aggregating of knowledge and facilitating of learning processes, the creating a shared institutional infrastructure, the framing and coordinating of local level activities, networking, building partnerships, aligning interests and resolving conflicts, and finally, advocating for change and mobilizing political support. This framework was used as a heuristic lens to study the role of intermediaries in experimentation. The study is based on the transdisciplinary research project Dresden City of the Future, Empowering Cities, Citizens Transforming Cities. Overall, there were 10 transition experiments that were implemented during this project, and they covered a range of subjects, starting from the edible city to the reduction of food waste, citizen participation at the district and neighborhood level, sustainable business practice, the creation of a car-free neighborhood, or a citizen laboratory for participation. And here I want to present empirical findings for 2 types of such intermediaries, niche and regime intermediaries. First of all, the office of the City of the Future was created within the municipality to mediate between the transition experiments, which were mostly led by civil society initiatives, and the public administration. It had a major role in supporting the TE in navigating the complex structures of the public administration. It also had to act as an advocate and create legitimacy for the transition experiments vis-a-vis the administrative departments. However, this intermediate role of the office also remained fragmented due to high staff turnover where competencies and trust were lost. The office also struggled because it had to mediate the tension between the culture of experimentation, which emphasizes openness and learning by failing on the one hand, and the accountability structures of the municipality with their concerns for control and predictability on the other. In the context of the pandemic, the office also had to mobilize support for the TE within the public administration to continue cooperation and implementation of the TE despite emergency mode. The roles of transition intermediaries can be further illustrated by the transition experiment material mediation, which is an example for niche intermediary. It challenged the current culture of abundance and argued for re-evaluating materials. They should no longer be seen as waste, but as valuables and resources that can be part of a resource cycle. It also wanted to be an intermediate space for learning and knowledge sharing. So it offered workshops, but it also integrated itself in a German-wide network of material initiatives to share its lessons learned with other local initiatives. And it created both a physical and a virtual platform for sharing and redistributing materials. And it also wants to encourage societal dialogue on our future by creating a third space to bridge the spheres of production, work, and civil society. This empirical exploration of the roles of intermediaries in experimentation contributes to the literature by elucidating how urban experimentation provides a space for experimenting with different forms of mediation. It shows how regime intermediaries adopt stronger roles in framing and coordinating action. So they primarily acted as guides and facilitators. By contrast, niche intermediaries are more active on articulating expectations for change, facilitating learning processes, and mobilizing support for change. So they acted more as visionaries and advocates of change. It also sheds light on incumbent agency in transitions, which suggests that we need to move beyond the niche regime dichotomy and rather understand niche regime interactions and how change can also emerge from within regime dynamics. And it particularly underlines the importance of these regime intermediaries to connect to and change established regimes. So for City of the Future, this could illustrate the enabling roles of municipalities for urban experimentation. However, it also revealed the disempowering dynamics of these niche and regime interactions, because the professional expertise needed and the complexity of administrative institutions also created power asymmetries between the TE and the administrative departments. What can we learn for policy and governance? This implies that the role of intermediaries should no longer be hidden and informal, but it should be recognized as an essential part of sustainability transitions. And thus, they should also be institutionalized in transdisciplinary research settings. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I would also invite you to visit the project website, where you can also find an urban transition kit, which highlights our lessons learned for practitioners. Thank you.